Hello and welcome to the season 5 of my podcast What's in a Story, titled Snippets from Forgotten Pages of History of South Asia. I am Lopamudra Moitro, an anthropologist, writer, translator and columnist, and in my podcast I read stories from my books on India and South Asia. The stories of this podcast are mostly from folklore and mythology and history, and I introduce each story with some additional information from the pages of history, archaeology, geology and others, which actually helps to place the stories within a specific context. In this season, we will be looking at some lesser known or completely unexplored and forgotten stories from history, which has been put together in my books through the help of old books, newspapers, gazetteers, numismatic or epigraphical evidences, which will be mentioned in the introduction of each story. These also help to provide a possible time of the origin of the story. Thanks to you listeners, this podcast, which began as a small individual effort of mine last year in May 2025, and according to the latest audience data, this podcast presently reaches across 21 countries and regions of the world, and apart from India, these are the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, Austria, Sri Lanka, Russia, France, Brazil, Australia, Singapore, Philippines, Turkey, Finland, Uruguay, South Africa, Italy, Bhutan, Curaçao, Czechia and Poland. Thanks to each and every listener who made this possible. Let's listen to today's story of season 5 of my podcast What's in a Story, titled Snippets from Forgotten Pages of History of South Asia. About today's story. The title of today's story is The Righteous King, and I read this from my book The Owl Delivered the Good News All Night Long, Folktales, Legends and Modern Lore of India by Aleph Book Company. And the original story is in Tamil. It has been written in English by our Radhakrishnan for this book. He is the OST to Chairman, Telangana Council of Higher Education, in the state of Telangana in southern India. Now there is another popular version of this story from the region which goes as to narrate that God, being pleased by the dispassionate conduct of the king, restored the lives of both the prince and the calf, thus alleviating both the king and the cow from their respective agony and sorrows. Now, interestingly, this story connects the two areas of music and administration and statesmanship through the musical instrument of bell. And by this, I mean bells being used as a channel to dispense justice. Now, there are numerous instances in history where bells have been used and traditionally rung to announce events and festivals or even time. But there are occasional and rare references also where bells have served significant purposes in administration. And by this I mean upholding fundamental rights of life or any threat of life. a small reference or small search on Google as bells being used to dispense justice will immediately bring in front several references of the use of bell to dispense justice in various folktales of Europe. In fact, the genre is so popular that there are various European examples. Say, for example, the title of the vicissitude of everything good and especially of a right justice, which was originally in Latin. And I am mentioning this from the source Gesta Romanorum, translated from the Latin by Charles Swan, revised and corrected by Wynard Hooper, published in London by George Bell and Sons in 1906. Also, there is the story of the Emperor Charlemagne and the serpent, which was originally in German, and I speak about this from the source H.A. Gueber's Legend of Switzerland from 1905. Also, there is the story of the Bell of Atri. This specific story is very often cited and referred to in Google searches. The original story is in Latin, and I am speaking here from the source Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's Tales of a Wayside Inn from 1915. Now, all of these European stories have been translated into English over the last nearly 2 centuries, and they are very well known the world over. However, very little is known about the very first time of the mention of the Bell of Justice, and this specific example takes us to South Asia, specifically to southern India and Sri Lanka, dating to the times of the mighty Chola Empire and the period of the famous king Manunidhi Cholan, also variously referred to as Illalan or Illara. Known as a very just, able and principled ruler, we get to know about the date of his rule from various ancient texts, including the sacred text, the Mahavamsa from Sri Lanka, and Silappattikaram and the Periya Puranam. These two are from India. Though his capital was at Thiruvarur, in corresponding to modern Tamil Nadu of southern India, Manunidhi Cholan ruled parts of northern Sri Lanka as well. And I am talking here between the time period of 205 to 161 BCE. By taking the region of Anuradhapura under his reign, after defeating the Sinhala king Asela. Thereby he established himself as the sole ruler of Rajarata kingdom, with Anuradhapura as its capital in Sri Lanka. From the very northern region, his territory extended till the north of the Mahaveli river in Sri Lanka, which made most parts of Sri Lanka to be under the rule of Manunidhi Cholan. Now, bells in general is a percussion instrument. Otherwise, it is specified as a directly struck idiophone. Mostly when struck, it vibrates in a single strong strike tone, with the sides of the bells forming an efficient resonator. These strikes may be made by both internal and external forces. While the internal forces may include a clapper or an uvalva, an external one may include a hammer or even a rope, or even by loose spears enclosed within the body of the bell. variously made from metal, glass, or ceramic, generally large bells, including the ones displayed at churches or clock towers, are mostly made from bell metal. And depending on their usage, the size of bells varies as well as their reach. To this purpose, bells which have been displayed at public places have historically been installed to reach a very wide section of the population around, including the ones for town clocks, churches or temples, or for various religious ceremonies. Now, the earliest mention of the bell of justice from the Mahavamsa goes as: Manunidhi Cholan was a famous king, and much part, as I mentioned, of Sri Lanka was under his direct rule for 44 years. So it's not surprising that the same storyline about Manunidhi is enshrined within various texts of Sri Lanka as well. Manunidhi Cholan annexed Anuradhapura to his Chola Empire of southern India in 205 BCE by defeating the Sinhala king Asela. The mention of this conquest is seen in the Theravada sacred text, the Mahavamsa, which also variously mentions Manunidhi Cholan as Ilala, Ilara or Ilaka. In Sri Lanka too, thus, the various narratives of the just rule and administration as well as the narrative of the Bell of Justice or Manunidhi Cholan remains famous. I mention here in brief the story from the Mahavamsa from the English translation by Wilhelm Geiger from 1912, and the story goes as: a Damila of noble descent named Ilaka, who came hither from the Chola country to seize on the kingdom, ruled when he had overpowered King Asela 44 years, with even justice toward friend and foe, on occasions of disputes at law. At the head of his bed, he had a bell hung up with a long rope, so that those who desired a judgment at law might ring it. The king had only one son and one daughter. When once the son of the ruler was going in a cart to the Tissa tank, he killed unintentionally a young calf, that is a baby cow, lying on the road with the mother cow, by driving the wheel over its neck. The mother cow came and dragged at the bell in bitterness of heart, and the king caused his son's head to be severed from his body with that same wheel. A snake had devoured the young of a hen, that is the bird, upon a palm tree. The hen bird, mother of the young one, came and rang the bell. The king caused the snake to be brought to him, and when its body had been cut open and the young bird taken out of it, he caused it to be hung up upon the tree. To note, the English over here dates back from 1912 and slightly might sound very different from the written or, of course, the spoken English at present. And I am reading this from the 1912 translation of page 143. Till the end of the 21st chapter of this book in the Mahavamsa, there are a few more stories about Ilala, which went on to show how just, impartial and responsible a person he was, who also took due action every time the bell of justice was rung. Now, There's an interesting example from a slightly later date from India, which is from the 17th century, where the Emperor Jehangir, in his book Jehangirnama, written by himself, speaks about also the bell of justice. And I read out here from the English translation from 1999, page 25, as hanging the chain of justice. After my accession, the first command issued by me was to have a chain of justice hung, so that if those charged with administering the courts were slack or negligent in rendering justice to the downtrodden, those who had suffered injustice could have recourse to the chain and pull it so that the sound would cause awareness. It is set up as follows. I ordered a chain made of pure gold, 30 ells in length, with 60 bells. It weighs 4 Hindustani mon, which is 32 Persian mons. One end is attached to the crenellations of the Shah Tower of the Agra citadel, and the other end is stretched to the bank of the river and affixed to a stone post erected there. And there are many lores associated with this bell of justice of Jehangir. According to popular anecdotes concerning the rule of Jehangir, once the long rope of the bells was worn out and it was replaced by dry straw. Soon after, one day, the bell could be heard ringing continuously. Now, ministers were sent for inspection, and it was found out that a almost starving horse was nibbling at the dry straw, making the bell ring vigorously. Now, this horse was gifted by the emperor himself to the commander-in-chief. However, this entire incident also revealed that the poor horse was rather thin, hungry, starving, and totally malnourished. And so it was munching on the straw, which it found hanging in front of him. Now the commander was thus called and berated severely by the emperor for his negligence. The commander was threatened to be stripped of his military position if he further failed to take care of the steed. This story is also often repeated across recent textbooks as an important example of the same idea of the bells of justice. Nevertheless, one cannot ignore the connection of this storyline from the ancient times, from Tamil Nadu and from Sri Lanka. It is also important to mention that so significant this narrative is even today in terms of portraying the protection of basic rights, that is fundamental rights, and upholding law and order of a region, that in honoring the ethos of the story and the basic symbolism that it upholds, often the story is even at present time cited within courthouses. Examples are the Madras High Court erected a statue of Manunidhi Cholan right outside the very entrance of the High Court. This was installed by Dr. P.C. Alexander, the then governor of Tamil Nadu, in 1988. In fact, in 2017, citing the significance of the bell of justice, the Supreme Court quoted the narrative of Manunidhi Cholan while dismissing a challenge about a Chief Justice. The court cited the story of Manunidhi Cholan to illustrate the principle that no one is above the law and that all are equal in the eyes of the law. More recently, in 2020, a judge's bench in the Madras High Court also cited the story of the Bell of Justice and Manunidhi Cholan while dispensing justice on a specific case. Both incidents were widely spoken about in leading dailies from across India. These examples are just a pointer towards the very fact that apart from common and local lore and proverbs, the storyline of the Bell of Justice continues to survive even amidst significant quarters even in present times. Follows the story, The Righteous King, from my book, The Owl Delivered the Good News All Night Long, Folktales, Legends and Modern Lore of India by Aleph Book Company. The story of the righteous king. In the Chola kingdom, around 205 BCE, King Manunidhi Cholan was known for his strong adherence to the principles of justice. He was known as the one who was fair towards both friend and foe when it came to dispensation of justice, and his commitment to it was unconditional, without fear or favor. His impartiality was evident in a case concerning his own son, when he had to deliver a verdict. Till today, this story is retold as a lesson on fairness, honesty and integrity. The story goes, in front of his palace, King Manunidhi Cholan had a large metal bell installed in order to help him dispense justice efficiently. Anyone who sought justice could ring the bell. Once the bell was rung, the king would respond by hearing the case and deliver his fair and just verdict. One day, a cow marched towards the palace and rang the bell, pleading for justice from the king. The king came out and was informed that the cow had lost her calf. The king was informed that the calf lost its life tragically after it had come under the wheels of the chariot of the king's own son, Prince Vidhi Vidangan. The prince was riding in his chariot on his way to the temple. People were lined up on the streets and cheering the prince amidst the loud beating of drums. In the midst of this commotion, a calf strayed onto the path of the chariot and accidentally came under the wheels, and in the process it lost its life. The cow was in a terrible shock to see her calf dead and immediately went to the king to seek justice. Though it was a terrible accident, Manunidhi Cholan was deeply moved by the plight of the cow. The king deliberated with his council of ministers. They were unwilling to be a part of the king's ultimate decision, and at the end, the king made his decision. The ministers advised the prince to perform rituals as a mark of penance as per the sacred texts. However, the king was not convinced. He refused to accept the decision of his ministers and drove his chariot over his son's body. This action of the king perplexed his subjects, but Manunidhi Cholan's action had underscored his philosophy. That is, everyone is equal before law, both humans and animals.